Okie dokie. So today is July 16th, and this is the SIG testing meeting. This is being recorded, so be nice. It'll be posted online shortly. And so we have a couple items on the agenda to chat about. First being the Spyglass Lens design doc from Catherine. And then potentially talking about the in repo configuration if we have time. So Catherine, yeah, you are there. Can you start us off?
Okay, sure. So this is actually here because Aaron put it here and blamed me. Basically, I guess I can present this thing, but it's probably not super valuable, but I'll do it anyway. If I can figure out the UI. There we go. No, I can't, whatever. Okay, so this doc is linked in the agenda. The basic idea is that Spyglass, i.e. the thing we use to view jobs right now, has a bunch of lenses. Spyglass has a bunch of lenses which can be used to see things, and that is how we view all our jobs. Part of the original design of Spyglass was that it would be possible for other people to add their own lenses to view their special jobs in special ways. We've heard from a few people who actually want to do this, but in practice to do it, you need to fork, prow, and then make changes to deck that get linked in, which is a fairly high barrier to entry and is not really how we want to do this. So this document proposes actually finishing the original goal of Spyglass and letting lenses exist externally. You can read this whole thing if you like. The short version is described in this diagram poorly, I guess. The short version is that currently lenses are iframes that are served by deck. In the future, if this is implemented, then they will still be iframes that are served by deck, but instead of the thing that deck does being handled internally, it will make requests to external lenses, and then they'll feed back through deck, which will essentially reverse proxy to those lenses. The upshot of this is that developing a lens is fairly simple, since all you have to do is implement the same things you have to do now and run it as a service in the cluster, and you don't have to deal with exposing it or anything. And in terms of modifying deck itself, it will just need to be configuration instead of code. I'm not sure that I have anything else to say. If you haven't happened to have read this, then reading all of it now, reading it all out now is probably not a super productive use of the meeting. So yeah. If anyone has comments on that bit, then they can say them, or I guess we can move on and people can look at it later, and maybe sometime in the not so distant future, it will actually be implemented.
Great. I think it looks pretty good. Any comments?
Yeah, I would just echo that it looks really good. I think calling out that we migrate the existing lenses to be external and make sure that we're dogfooding the process means that it'll stay simple to use. I like it.
And also, while I'm here, if no one else has any comments, by Steve's request, I will show off the fact that you can now link to log lines in your job logs. Go way back and find one. This probably has some lines. And you can click on them, and there will be links. And then if you were to go to this link, it jumps there. Amazing. That's it.
How does it handle skipped lines?
It will load the lines and then jump there.
Okay, cool.
That is all I have to say.
Cool. Well then, I I don't know if Cole is here. I know Cole is here. I don't know if he's planning to join. Alvaro, do you want to talk about the in repo config? We are not hearing you if you are talking, though I do see your microphone is not muted. And I think Cole, I think Cole is joining as well. Oh, look, there he is.
Barring all of his mic working, we were going to have a conversation after this meeting just in case it took longer, just so that everyone wasn't stuck in there for a while. Yes, so what? I mean, I feel like it'd be good to talk about this if we can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That's a good start. Okay, so yeah, maybe first off to give a very, very high level overview what the thing is and what the goal is. So what I want to achieve is that it's possible to sort of have dynamic jobs that are versioned in the same repository. The code is also being versioned, and that are basically loaded at the time a pull request is created. In order to basically allow to change some of this job config within a pull request and get immediate feedback on those changes. The main concerns around the topic were that it will introduce some complexity. Right now we have a static config, we can just access it, it will work. This will mean we have to do some fetching and get it from the repository and so on. And the goal of this specific PR at this specific stage was to show and discuss if it's possible to build this thing in a way with an amount of complexity people can agree to merge. Yeah, that's the current state of it. I don't know if you have questions at this point. The things we were to talk about are fairly specific, like implementation-wise. I'm not sure if we should just do that now or if there are questions. Okay, there are no questions. I mean, I can continue and tell. So basically, I think there are right now 3 points Cole mostly pointed out on this pull request. One is I put a helper in the plugin agent. Second is I made trigger manage a status context, and third is the whole topic of status reconciling, which means that statuses get set back if jobs get removed, which in this pull request is implemented in a way that it will cost 1 token per request that ends up being processed by trigger. So first off, I feel a bit like I may be wasting some people's time here right now. Is it okay if I continue like this?
Yeah, I think so. Just given the caveat that anyone who isn't super interested in this or hasn't read the PR, like the conversation that's going to follow is going to be very specific. So I don't think there's anything else on the agenda today. So if that's you, thanks for coming. If you're interested, stick around. This is cool stuff.
Okay, so first off, so the 3 points I just mentioned were the ones I read as a feedback that were like the more higher level concerns. There were also some points around how like details, but since the purpose of the pull request was more to determine on a higher level if the amount of complexity is okay, I just picked this. Is this the complete list, or did I miss anything that one of you has more concerns about? Like if those 3, if we were to find okay solution for those 3, would it be okay to have the whole thing done? Okay. So the first one is the helper and the plugin agent. So what I did is basically added a helper around the whole config fetching that fetches a base char for the pull request and does error handling in that if any error occurs during the fetching of the config, it will post a comment on GitHub. Cole mentioned that it is probably weird to have it in a plugin agent instead of as part of the config package, which is a good comment. So I could move this thing to the config package. My question then would be if it should still contain the error handling part, so the whole post comment to GitHub if something goes wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we don't really have like a good background of plugins doing work and then reporting with comments and statuses. Like I think the linter is the only other prior art there, right? I guess in my mind, it just seems like that's a lot of stuff that already gets handled for jobs and reporting. And I don't necessarily want us to have a bunch of different ways to accomplish the same type of thing. But I don't know if it's any more clean to like force repos to run a check config pre-submit.
Yeah, that sort of goes into the second point. So generally, I think it's a good idea to have a status, to have a pre-submit for this. The question is still hypothetically something could go wrong within hook, and the pre-submit could still be passing. Like, I don't know, a connection that doesn't work out or whatever. In that case, the user would just see a red status context and no feedback on what exactly happened. Question is if that would be okay, or how we should handle that. I mean, for the beginning, I'm also fine to just say we put the whole checking into a pre-submit, and we assume that if the pre-submit passes, the parsing also does pass in hook, which is most likely true for 99% of the cases. And don't create a comment there.
Potentially. I think in the past, we've also talked about like shipping other jobs as sort of like built-in, anointed jobs, like the branch protector or the label sync and stuff. So maybe this could be precedent for Prow shipping jobs that are enabled implicitly. But at the same time, then I think we need to be careful about how we identify the job that, like yeah. We would just disallow somebody from having a job that posts the same status or has the same name.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to the original question, we would not have something in hook create a comment on GitHub. We would just have the pre-submit fail. Just to have that answered.
I think that seems reasonable.
Okay. Then we can go to the second point, which is the status context, which right now is managed by Trigger, but could be replaced by pre-submit. So generally, I very much like the idea to put the whole thing in a pre-submit. What we have to consider is that this pre-submit will need both the test info repo and the code repo, because it has to merge both the configs together and then check if it's valid.
Would we want it to have the version of the repo, or would we want it to have the config that's currently uploaded to the cluster?
It needs both at the end of the day.
No, I mean, like, would we want to validate that the in-repo config, when merged with the current master of the repo that holds the central config, works? Or do we want to validate that the in-repo config merged with the stuff that's in the config map works? Could we get into like some weird transient state there?
Both, actually. The pre-submit will get the merged state, and then this merged state has to be checked together with what's in the config map.
It would be really nice if we didn't have to do like cross-repo validation for config files. So if we could set up some rules to define the prow.yaml so that we can validate it individually, that would be super nice. What kind of things do we need to do validation?
Couldn't you just have like two any of the do we have any rules today that are like restricting how many jobs can post to the same context or have the same name? Can we do validation without all of it?
Not that I know of, but that doesn't mean
Right now, we check that like if you configured 2 jobs with the same name that have a branch collision, I think that would be, we'd raise an error for that. So yeah, that is a possibility. And if we want to do more strict validation in the future, we probably do want to be able to validate against the main config too, I guess.
And that's, I guess, that's why I was asking, like, is there a weird erase condition that we could like introduce by loading the version of the config that's in the repo, but not what's been uploaded? And then B, if we could just look at what was uploaded, then we can just mount that into the job instead of having to do cross-repo cloning and validation.
Oh, that's what you mean. I mean, I guess it would work to just mount it in. Although hypothetically, you could still have a ways if the config was changed to be invalid or just.
I'm pretty sure it's impossible to avoid a race because we have 2 repos and either one of them can make a change. That would be a conflict, right? So if either of them pushes a change, right, as we're about to merge something in the other one, it's going to cause problems.
Yeah.
Actually, just for the test info repo, because for the code repo, you will get a new pre-submit for your new change. Right?
Right. I think it's possible to, it would be possible for the race to make the validation fail in one of the distributed repos.
Yeah, and what, for example, could happen is that if you have an invalid cluster currently in your invalid config currently in your cluster, which doesn't get loaded because it's invalid, on the checking it will just say the whole thing is invalid, even though your changes to reported YAML are not the cause.
So the chance of a race like that happening is pretty low, and the validation then would just start. We just have like broken validation on the master branch for that repo, and it would be obvious what the problem is. So I don't know that that's it's definitely not ideal, but I don't know that that's a huge blocker.
I mean, okay. I think it's unavoidable, but the failure condition there is really soft. So I think failure mode, I think is
Okay, and the approach to get the config for the test info repo would be to clone it or to use the config map? Or doesn't matter?
I think we need to, don't we need to clone it? Because I think we need the actual files and not the parsed version, right?
Yeah.
That's a question I can't answer.
I think you're more likely to have.
Like we could maybe serialize the config map and then like reload it again, but I think we'd probably be better off cloning.
Yeah, you'd get weird results if you mounted the config map. You'd have to. Then you start racing with the config updater. I feel like it'd be better just to clone it.
Okay. That would, but then mean that people basically have to manually create this pre-submit, because depending on how you access your test info repo and where its files is, the arguments for the config checker will be different. So it would be a bit hard to generate the whole thing.
Don't we already have that for the config updater plugin?
Wait, why would the location of the files be different too? Aren't we just saying you have to have a proud.yaml file at your repo root?
No, yeah, for the code repo, but not for the test info repo.
Oh, well, it sounds like we might need to like put something like that into config where we define where our config actually lives.
I feel like we already have that in the config updater?
We might, but yeah, we need some source of truth of like how to find the config from within the config.
Okay, okay, so for the moment, I will first build it with just people configure it, unless it's already there.
Yeah, I think we should be able to, like, I think the external facing config that we're definitely going to need is the version of the check config image to use. But I think we should be able to generate the rest of it because we can use well, I guess we don't know. Yeah. We can have a convention where we can generate it because the update config plugin is already pushing proud.yaml and the plugins and whatnot. The only issue would be if you named the config map with your config and it's something different, then we wouldn't be able to auto detect that.
So are we considering like auto-generating these jobs, or are we configuring or considering having them be like an implicit job that would just kind of automatically run and you wouldn't necessarily configure it? I like the idea of the job like actually existing in config somewhere, but
it would exist in the config viewer on deck, right?
yes.
I mean,
Like we need it to actually exist in the list of jobs for everything to work smoothly. But I'm wondering if we want to like have this happen at config load time or something where like these jobs are automatically applied to repos that have this enabled or something.
I would like that, yeah.
Like because this is something that we want it to be automatic, but we also like, yeah, I guess if it shows up on deck, that could be okay. We probably, it would be kind of nice if this was like, you know, defined in config in the repo too, but I don't know of a way that we could, you know, we can't just like automatically do that.
yeah, that's a bit hard.
What do you mean it would be hard to do automatically in config?
Yeah,
Like
I would also prefer that simply because it is more or less a requirement and have people put it in every repo, even though there's not the choice of not having it.
Right.
Doesn't make too much sense. And by the way, the version of Power we could theoretically find out if we put it into a variable in the code. That's what we do a lot in our stuff. We just put a variable with a git hash at build time into the code, and that's how it knows its own version and can
I think we
fetch
actually
other things.
we already do that for deck.
Oh, okay, so perfect. Then we can
I
probably
mean,
just use it.
the prior art for the pod utils though is just to have those as config options. I think either one's fine.
Okay, so
If we can assume that every image exists at every hash, which previously was not always the case.
let's assume for the time being that this is the case.
Assume that now, yeah.
Okay, and then the last point would be status reconciling. So what happened in the pull request is that it always fetched all statuses and then sort of compared them. But the drawback is obviously that we have to pay 1 token for this, which you both didn't like. So the alternate to that would be to have some component that gets all events for anything that could change the config. So that is the config for the or in the cluster itself, so what's managed in the test info repo, and that's events for changes to the base of a pull request and events to for changes to the head. So we would sort of have to build something that gets notified when one of those 3 changes, and then checks if it has to retire something.
What's the, sorry, I forget. What's the effect of the reconciler? What are you doing there?
To remove GitHub status contexts that don't have a job anymore, and that's basically what your status reconciler does.
On merges to the map, like on merges to the target branch of the repo.
On changes to anything that impacts the config at the end of the day.
So when the config changes, okay. So when the config changes, all the info, okay.
Yeah. So.
And why doesn't the status reconciler handle this?
Because the thing is, you need to get notified for changes to the base and to the head of the pull request, because those could change the config. Probably the status reconciler can be extended to do that. I don't know. I just had a quick look at its code. But the main thing that would then need to be changed is that the status reconciler gets all push events in order to be notified when either of those 2 changes. That's currently not happening.
Why would it need to get push events?
Because imagine, for example, I do a pull request onto a master branch and someone else, and then a job gets created, it fails, and in the meantime, someone else removes that job from the master branch. Now this context needs to get retired. And somehow the status reconciler or whatever does this needs to know that something changed, and it has to check if it needs to do something. And that would be this push event. Or is there another way.
It reacts to the change config in the the config already updates when the config changes, right?
But if we're resolving config dynamically and we're not ever like storing the full set of config on the repos we have, then we wouldn't get that. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So is the idea to have, I know that this isn't how it's written right now, but are we imagining that the branch protector will also be looking at these proud.yaml files?
I don't think that will work because branch protection is a setting that works on a branch. You can have different pull requests on the same branch that have different required jobs de facto.
Yeah. So, but that's only a case if the proud jobs are actually being, or if the PR is actually changing the proud jobs, right? Which a very small fraction of PRs will, and not blocking the statuses on those would be kind of like a big deal. Like for example, that'd be a hard blocker for Kubernetes. We wouldn't be able to use any of this for Kubernetes if we have to get rid of branch protection. But if we have the branch protector look at the proud.yaml files and apply apply whatever's configured for the master branch to that branch, then that seems to make sense, right?
But what happens, for example, if I remove a power job in my pull request and there's a branch protection for this power job?
Yeah, so
for this job context.
Yeah, in your pull request, it looked like you were doing some status context setting stuff. So are you imagining you'd set a skip status there or something? That's what I was imagining.
Ah, okay.
That's what that's what it looked like you were doing in the code there. You were finding things that were marked as required, but this PR should not have required because it's changed the conditions. So for those jobs that were previously required that we're not requiring anymore, we just mark them as skipped.
Okay, yeah, I guess that would work.
And then we can actually have the vast majority of PRs wouldn't actually need to do that, right? And it means that the statuses that are required could still be marked as required. And that would allow us to potentially use this for like the case our main crow instance.
Okay, yeah, that's actually not something that PR did, but it's a good idea nonetheless. Yeah.
I don't think it'd be that much extra work either. Right, we just have to make branch protector consume those proud.yaml files. So just has to know where to look for them and then clone and use them.
And then the branch protector would basically just check out master, for example, and then apply the rules that are currently on master to the branch protector there.
Yeah, I think that'd be sufficient. If we want to add more stuff for handling different branches and stuff like that, that could get complicated. But we can always consider that in the future.
Shouldn't we? I mean, I don't think master is special in any way, shape, or form, and we've got repos that don't use master as their default.
The default branch though is what we want to use.
But like, why wouldn't we just do all branches?
I mean, it doesn't make sense for like if we check out all the branches, they have different versions of proud.yaml that specify different things. Which one do we use for branch protection?
But branch protection is configured on a per branch level.
It's on a branch level, right? So you just
but currently our config is not on a per branch level, right? Our config defines all the jobs for all the branches potentially. Like you could split that, if you wanted to, but it wouldn't work. Right, like we have one config.yaml file and the jobs for all of our branches are defined there.
Does it make sense for us? Like, maybe we should disallow that.
Having branch config is what does that even mean though? Like then we have multiple sources of truth, and if they differ,
but we're gonna de facto have multiple sources of truth. Like it's gonna be the obvious thing to do when I'm making a pull request to a different branch and I need to change a job. I'll change it in that branch. Are we gonna only honor proud.yaml files in the default branch?
Yeah, that was my understanding of how all of this worked. If there's multiple, putting allowing config to exist on multiple branches, that's almost like a separate topic. But we could do that in our repo, right?
Why is it? I don't follow anymore.
Yeah, I feel like the argument for these features from Alba was like to version the jobs with the code they're testing, and I think the natural extension of that is to.
I mean, how does any of this work if we have config on multiple branches?
You'd have to validate that it only runs. I mean, you'd basically have to validate that no branch settings are set or something to that extent.
But I still don't understand why it shouldn't work. I mean, then I create a pull request on a non-default branch. What would be the issue?
I think the
if
issue, if there's a job that's configured to run, if we have a branch release 115, there are jobs configured to run on release 115, and they look different in the release 115 branch and the master branch. Like, which version do you use?
Yeah.
But also, like, yeah, that would make config validation even harder too, right? Because you have to load every possible CrowdIAML and every possible.
I mean, it just makes config validation make no sense, because if we no longer have a single source of truth. You know, our config defines jobs across all branches. If we now have branches that each can define config across all branches, like that just doesn't really make sense. There's going to be overlap.
Yeah.
So I still don't follow the discussion at all. Why is it so much of a problem? I mean, if I create a pull request against release 150, my pull request gets merged. The result of the merge gets read as job config.
So imagine that on the master branch, we have some jobs configured for release 115. And then on the release 115 branch, you change those jobs. Like which jobs actually run on release 115 now? Is it the branch jobs that are defined on the release 115 branch, or like the ones that are defined for the release 115 branch in master?
But that's the one special case of talking about the test info repo, right?
Like, if we wanted to do what you're saying, if we wanted to do what you're saying, our jobs wouldn't be allowed to specify branches at all. You'd have to just define the job in that branch in the config.
Yes.
But right now, our jobs can specify branches. Like we say, this job can run on these branches.
Then we probably should add a config validation for the product YAML that this is not allowed in this one case, if it's in repo.
So you're saying that if you want to have jobs on different branches, you have to split them into different files on different branches, and you have to like switch between branches to see which jobs are configured there?
Yes, that's one of the goals actually, because we had the issue that jobs basically was. They stopped working on some other release branches and we didn't notice at all.
Okay, that's going to dramatically change config validation. So like if we want to do that, that's a huge like paradigm shift in Prow, right? So that would be like we should definitely address this first or separately.
But this is just for the product YAML. What's missing if you disallow specifying any branch configuration? What's then still missing?
Periodics, I think.
So first off, this pull request right now is just pre-submit. Let's ignore everything else. Will be a follow-up, but right now just pre-submit to keep it a bit scope.
Yeah, no, sorry, I didn't realize we didn't do periodics in here. Yeah, I think if we disallow any branch settings, and then it's implicit that they run on a branch. Or explicitly validate that your branch config is set to the branch size.
Is this really a better UX? Like this seems like we're trying to make the UX worse, in my opinion. You know, having to switch branches and define your jobs in different branches. Like in the most cases, all of your jobs are for different branches are pretty similar with slight tweaks. And I don't know why you'd want to have to define the actually have those in separate files and separate Git branches and everything.
Because right now, if we create a release branch, we have to create a copy of every job we have to not have it what somewhere later on without noticing. Because
yeah, I think
something about the config.
But then it just makes it really hard to do any sweeping changes across all of your jobs because you'd have to actually make changes to all those branches.
Yes, it's really annoying. That's why we are talking about the whole thing.
Well, this would make it that annoying, right? That's what I'm saying. If you then have to like make changes to all your jobs, you'd have to make a PR to every single branch is what you'd have to do.
If I really want that, yes. But right now I have to make a PR against one branch that changes more jobs. But the total amount of changes stays equal because we have to have copies anyways, because there's a decent chance they will just want.
Yeah, I will say when we cut release branches for OpenShift as well, we copy every job.
I would think that's easier than, when you have to go do an image bump or something, having to change every single release branch, having to PR all of them every time you want to change something across all the jobs.
But we don't usually do anything for all the releases.
I think that the intent is to freeze that job at the state that worked at the release and keep it there. It specifically changes that like update everything to move forward in some weird direction that usually break old release jobs. And Kubernetes might not hit that as much because I think you guys only do n-2. When you have like n-10 releases, that stuff that worked 3 years ago does not look anything.
What about like, that's how we could like do security patches and stuff for that, you know, like even if we're not changing what versions images are running on, like, or, you know, like the major versions, frequently you like, I don't know, I guess I'm imagining that this is not going to be what would be usable for Kubernetes, you know, like our use case, because I think like we very heavily make a lot like sweeping changes across a lot of branches. Like for every time we do a config bump, for example, like every day we do that.
Because you guys are bumping kubekins, for instance?
It's not even kubekins, but just like all of our test images are published daily now, if there's any changes to them.
Do you actually validate that those old release jobs work when you do that?
They're on test grid, so we get emails if they start failing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a difference in like approach, because I think having a job that works, freezing it in that state and then not touching it is way more effective as a strategy when you have release branches that are 3 years old. Like the amount of overhead and like just combinatorial nonsense that happens is too much.
Yeah, I guess letting stuff stagnate like that has bitten us so many times though, right? If we just like let a job run forever and then this is, you know, it's running deprecated code that isn't even published anymore. No.
But that's not, I mean, that's Kubernetes, right? Like we support all of those releases and they need to run exactly how they run, right? Like it's a huge amount of effort to go bump dependencies in every single one of these jobs. And that code isn't deprecated. So I think in like, even just splitting it out into separate repos, like that basically kills the ability to do sweeping changes, regardless of whether it's in branches or not.
That's fair.
So
if it's in branches, it's going to make it even worse though, because then you have to make a PR to every branch in every repo everywhere. It's going to be impossible
robots can do PRs, right? So I think like you're gonna like in order to use this, you would have to eat the cost of increased automation complexity, but to do sweeping changes.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a decision you make.
Right.
Which of the two you want. If you say it's completely static for all branches, it doesn't change at all, then just version it statically inside your test infra repo. But that's not the case at all for us. That has really bitten us to, initially we did not copy those jobs. We had a lot, you create a pull request against an older release, or there nothing works, nothing to do with your pull request, it's just broken because you changed something on the jobs in the meantime.
Yeah, Cole, I would say I think it's like way more common that a job organically changes over time as new things come in and then just totally doesn't work for old stuff, rather than old jobs where all of the inputs are versioned. They're going to keep working. I mean, there's nothing changing there. They should keep working.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we would need to validate that the pre-submit. How do we do that? I guess we would have to. Yeah, I either validate that no branch options are set on the pre-submits in the repo, or that the only branch option that is set is the branch that it's on.
Yeah, I wouldn't even allow the latter, because if you like create a new branch, then all sorts of weird things could happen.
Well, if we don't like have them specify anything, we're going to have a little bit of bespoke config loading stuff to automatically apply that, which could be fine. Currently, those are all like regular expressions. I don't know if that's going to be an issue. I think it's probably fine, right?
Just generate it with anchors.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the answer.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I'll try to talk to some Kate's people and see if that the whole splitting it across branches would be a hard blocker for Kubernetes or not. Because none of our jobs are like that now, and I'm not sure if that's out of necessity. I kind of my understanding was that was kind of out of necessity, but I'll try and see if that's the case or not.
Okay. But past that, I think if we generate a check config job and we use that to post the status and link out to logs, I think the rest of this is good.
So one question about the generating the check config: do we want to like have some configuration option where you specify the job that is then run everywhere, or do we want to like totally generate it and just have that be all automatic? Like, do we want to make it so that somebody could say like, here's the check config job I want to run, so they could like tweak it, because like then they could apply their own like stuff on top of it, like their own linting for, you know, maybe you want your job names to follow some certain pattern. It'd be pretty nice to be able to bundle all of that for you know, into one thing.
Couldn't you just do that as a pre-submit?
Yeah, you could.
Are you worried about getting copied everywhere?
Well, since this would be like a convenient way for you to like enforce your requirements everywhere across all the prod.yamls that your Crow instance uses. You're right. You could put a pre-submit in each individual repo, but since this is already like spread everywhere, it could be nice to make this like a way to do that as well, or to extend this functionality so that you could apply, you know, maybe multiple jobs could be applied universally with this mechanism.
Maybe that whole user story could be a complete distinct issue of generating a job for all repos from a template or something like that.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we need to do any of that now, but it might be worth just like thinking about if that's, you know, generalizable, because it seems like a pretty useful thing to be able to say like all of these jobs that are going to use Prow, you know, like we want to make sure that they're formatting their files correctly or whatever, you know.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea, but yeah, I would like to keep it out of scope for
Yeah, that's totally fine. Yeah, just something to think about.
So like getting back to the bit bigger view, so all in all, is it fair to say that there are no big concerns around the idea as a whole right now?
I would say that's true, yes. There's some little ones, certainly little ones, but yeah, this seems achievable, and it seems like, you know, it's going to be a lot of work, and like I'm sure that we'll run into weird bugs, but
yeah,
I think we have a sane way of approaching it.
What did we say for like the token cost per push event to reload the statuses?
Hey, I'm going to leave this meeting, which, by the way, I don't think it's going to end the meeting, so I'll let you guys keep talking, but I need to leave. So hopefully this doesn't do anything bad.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, Alva, what was, so we're, when a push event happens to a branch, we then need to trigger the reconciliation behavior on all in-flight pull requests for that branch, right?
Yeah, to possibly retire status contexts that don't have a backing job anymore.
Okay. So is it? I think if we write it to, yeah, if we write it to detect the difference between the two Git commits, and only check around for statuses and whatnot if there was a difference, I think we can.
Which two Git commits are you currently referring to?
So on a push event, they're just the before and after.
So basically, if the push event resulted in possibly resulted in a config change, you mean, if you can short circuit?
Yeah. So clone both commits, figure out if there's a change. If there was, every token you're going to use is a token that was necessary to use. So there's no like unnecessary.
Yeah, I think that's completely doable. The whole approach of building something that sort of gets events from this three angles, base, and head of all pull requests plus the static config is just more effort, but it's not like the
well, because I mean, otherwise you would end up relisting every status context on every in-flight PR on every merge, right?
I agree. It's a very good point. And I agree that we should probably do it, not do it like that, but instead have something that gets all these events. I just wanted to say the reason why I initially came up with that is to build. I can probably build it in an hour. The thing that gets events from all these three things will take a lot more time.
Yeah,
but that's fair.
Yeah, if you do. Like if we do create the event gathering thing that detects config changes, the way the status reconciler is currently factored, after you've determined the previous and current state of the config, like everything downstream from that is already.
Okay, That's good to know.
So the status reconciler right now, it just takes, I think it's a channel, the previous occurrence.
Okay.
Just runs it.
Yeah, it's just a bit more complicated because it can be different for every pull request. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So to wrap the whole thing up, I guess the next thing I would like to do is to create a pull request that does the changes in the config package, like actually adds this whole pre-submit getting function and so on. Doesn't yet implement the in repo config, but is just a stub for right now. To then plug it through all the plugins and whatever else we have that accesses the pre-submit config. Would that be a reasonable next step?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I will do that.
And like the status reconciliation stuff, like is always, even right now, because it's event driven, and like it has to be event driven, right? Like otherwise it's a huge pain. It's best effort. So if that takes a while to implement afterwards, like people will just have to deal with it if they're changing jobs.
Yeah, actually, that's what I thought as well. It took us 2 months into using Pro until we realized we need this. So it doesn't happen too often. Yeah. Okay, so from my side for now, that would be all. Unless there are more questions, I think we're done. Cool, then thanks you both really for your time on this. I really appreciate it. And yeah, have a nice day.
Yeah, thanks for working on this.
No problem. Bye.
Yeah.